Good evening and welcome to NTD UK News. I'm Stuart Leeson here at today's top stories. Official data shows a quarter of registered COVID-19 deaths are not primarily caused by the infection. A mix and match COVID-19 vaccine trial is recruiting more volunteers. And lockdown is making shoppers treasure bricks and mortar shops. The latest official figures show a quarter of registered COVID-19 deaths are not actually caused by the viral infection. These people died with the virus, but not from it.
According to the figures published by the Office for National Statistics, COVID deaths are divided into two separate sets: deaths involving the virus and deaths due to the virus. Recent official data show that the CCP virus was not the primary reason for a quarter of registered COVID deaths. For example, for week 13 of this year, ending on April 2nd, death involving the virus was 400, but death caused by the virus was 308, a difference of 23%. For 2021, the number of total deaths involving COVID is nearly 56,000, whereas the number of deaths due to COVID is just over 49,000, a difference of 12%. The official data show in England, the number of deaths involving the virus in week 13 accounted for only 5% of all deaths, compared with 7.3% the week before. These figures are prompting calls to speed up the easing of restrictions, but Prime Minister Boris Johnson warned on Tuesday that cases will rise again as restrictions ease.
But the bulk of the work in reducing the disease has been done by the lockdown. So, as we unlock, the result will inevitably be that we will see more infection. Sadly, we will see more hospitalisation and deaths.
England reopened all retail, hairdressers, gyms and pub gardens from Monday. The government is carefully watching for changes in the data. The next step in lockdown easing will start from May 17th at the earliest, with indoor hospitality venues allowed to reopen.
A major UK trial to look at the effects of mixing and matching COVID-19 vaccines is recruiting more participants.
A UK-based study led by the Oxford Vaccine Group is calling for participants. The COMCOV-2 study is recruiting over 1,000 volunteers who have received one vaccine dose in the past 8 to 12 weeks. Anyone over 50 who has had a first dose of the Pfizer or AstraZeneca jab can apply. Over 800 people are taking part so far and have received 2 doses of either Pfizer, AstraZeneca or a mix. Now with the Moderna jab rollout starting and a 4th jab, Novavax, expected to be approved soon, the vaccine mix and match trial hopes for more participants. According to the COMCOV study website, the aim is to see how well people's immune systems respond when their second dose is a different type of vaccine to their first dose. The study will also look at the side effects of mixed doses. Participants will receive the same or a different vaccine as their first dose, and they will not know which jab they receive. They will need to do between 5 and 7 blood tests over 10 months to look at the immune responses. They will also need to complete an online diary for up to 4 weeks following their second dose. Scientists say combining vaccines might give broader, longer-lasting protection against the virus and its new variants, and also offer more flexibility during the vaccine's rollout. More than 32 million people in the UK have received a first dose of a vaccine, while almost a quarter of those have had their second dose.
As shops reopen their doors on the high street, retailers are hoping to make up for lost time. NTD's Jane Worrell looks at the future of bricks and mortar stores in London.
It seems a long time since going shopping, and not just for groceries, a relief for customers and staff.
This time we've really missed talking to people as much as they've missed coming into the bookshops. I think we've been shut in there doing a sort of mail order thing, probably all going slightly mad.
Multiple lockdowns meant shops deemed non-essential were forced to close, driving an increase in online shopping. It's raised the question of the future of bricks and mortar stores.
Boarded up shops are a reminder that many didn't make it through the lockdown. For those that did reopen, we may see more integrated online and offline sales, a trend that's increased in recent years.
Many stores will be using themselves as more of a showroom so that people go in, have a look around, even if they end up buying the same item from the store online.
While shopper numbers in London overall were an encouraging sign, some areas like London's financial district have taken a big hit.
We've got lots of members who have shops in tube stations, in Canary Wharf, for instance, which has actually been devastated. I do know for a fact that, Canary Wharf has opened and the shop's there. And our members are reporting 75% down on trade, and they've only been open a few days.
He says in general the business rates for retailers on the high street makes it difficult too. But there's a sense of optimism that people will come back and walk into stores once again in the coming months.
With COVID, it's accelerated that online shopping presence, and people have got more digital. People are more savvy now to doing that type of work. Do I think that they'll stay there? No, I think people will come back to traditional.
15, 16 people in this shop, 60 people across 9 shops. We're not a big business, and I think you realise how important that, all these little packets of employment are for communities and for other businesses. They all buy coffee, they buy the sandwiches, those things. It's all interlocked. Lockdown and absence of physical shops, for bookshops in particular, has re-established them as really central bits of sort of glue in communities and central places for people to enjoy as a leisure.
Especially for businesses like this bookshop that's been here for 30 years. It's a shopping experience that can't be replicated online. Jane Werrell, NTD News, London.
The House of Lords has defeated the government on a bill that limits how soldiers can be prosecuted for war crimes. The Overseas Operations Bill was one of the Conservative Party's election promises.
The government wants to protect soldiers from so-called vexatious prosecutions, including for genocide and war crimes. A bill to that end passed by the Commons earlier this year, but the House of Lords thinks it could put soldiers beyond the reach of the law. Former NATO head Lord Robertson was one of those proposing amendments.
Well, as the objective of this bill is clear and understandable. It is to protect our troops in foreign operations from vexatious prosecution. So one might contend who could reasonably object to that. Certainly not me. But sadly, the bill doesn't do what it claims to do.
Robertson echoed concerns voiced by some human rights organisations.
For the first time in the history of British law, we would be creating a two-tier justice system where troops acting for us abroad would be treated differently from other civilians in society.
The Lords voted for various changes that water down the legislation. The government's version would make it very hard to prosecute soldiers 5 years after an incident. That expiration period would not apply to rape and sexual violence, but to war crimes, crimes against humanity, genocide and torture. That's where the Lords disagree.
This bill, by saying that there is a presumption against prosecution for the most serious of all crimes, namely genocide, crimes against humanity and torture, it undermines some of the most basic international legal standards for which this nation was renowned.
The Lords voted to exclude all serious crimes from the bill, including genocide and war crimes. The bill now heads into a final back and forth on amendments.
The Queen has already returned to her royal duties only 4 days after her husband's death. According to an entry in the court circular, the Queen attended an event on Tuesday to mark the retirement of Earl Peel, the former Lord Chamberlain. In this private event, the Queen accepted Peel's wand and insignia of office. The Lord Chamberlain is the royal household's most senior official. The royal family is observing 2 weeks of mourning following Prince Philip's death, which will end on April 22nd. On April 21st, the Queen will mark her 95th birthday. German Chancellor Angela Merkel wants the federal government to have the power to impose COVID-19 restrictions on states. She said overruling Germany's federal system is needed to beat the pandemic.
Germany's government on Tuesday approved legal changes to allow for uniform lockdown restrictions across Germany. Currently, in Germany's federal system, all 16 states apply the COVID-19 rules as they deem appropriate. The Chancellor says the government needs these extra powers to combat the pandemic.
We need
to break the third wave of the pandemic and stop the rapid rise in infections. People understand regional differences very well, but they expect traceability and clarity.
The so-called emergency brake would kick in when a threshold of new infections is met. Whenever a 7-day incidence rate of 100 cases per 100,000 people is reached for 3 consecutive days, a city or a region would be required to enforce stricter restrictions. They include rules on social gatherings and the closing of businesses, as well as a new and controversial overnight curfew.
The nationwide emergency brake is overdue, because even if it is hard to hear it again today, the situation is serious. And we all have to take it seriously.
2 lawyers and judges' associations criticised the plans as a disproportionate power grab that would break with Germany's legal tradition of a federal system. Other experts say the incidence rate is not a reliable indicator to determine restrictions on citizens' basic rights. The changes to Germany's infection protection law need approval from Parliament. Only one opposition party is principally opposed.
An East London man has been jailed for plotting a terrorist attack. Police said 27-year-old Sahib Abu ordered weapons, equipment and clothing online in preparation for an attack. After he ordered an 18-inch sword online, he was detained in an armed police operation. According to the BBC, he was previously convicted of a commercial burglary in June 2018 and was released last year. It was reported that other members of Abu's family have been involved with the ISIS terrorist group, including 2 half-brothers who are believed to have been killed fighting for ISIS in Syria. Abu has been sentenced to life imprisonment to serve a minimum of 19 years. Ancient woodlands have existed for thousands of years, despite being under constant threat. In a new report, the Woodland Trust highlights ancient woods and trees and their value to us. NTD's Neil Woodrow brings us more.
The Woodland Trust has a new report out called The State of the UK's Woods and Trees. In it, it says that our ancient woods and pastures are irreplaceable artefacts of history, culture and ecology overlaid and interwoven. The Trust has enlisted a team of citizen scientists to help collate the data. I spoke with the lead on this report, Hazel Jackson. She told me more about these older trees.
Our ancient and veteran trees are the beating hearts of our landscapes. They're old trees which offer a sort of micro habitat to lots of amazing wildlife that rely on them, solely rely on them. So
they are in the process of documenting the sites of these trees on an inventory. People can sign up online to be part of the team to help locate these ancient trees.
And what that helps us do is map the locations of all these really precious trees across our landscape. And by knowing where they are, we can protect them.
They currently have 123,000 records on their inventory so far, but Jackson says they've barely scratched the surface. The oak tree is one such ancient tree. It's the national tree of England, representing strength and endurance. The Martin oak in Cheshire has a girth of 14 metres. That's the measurement taken around the tree at 1.5 metres from the ground. And it's significant for the ecology.
An oak tree, for example, can support over 2,300 different types of wildlife.
Only 2.5% of the UK's land area is covered in ancient woodlands. Jackson says they are home to many declining species of birds, butterflies and specialist plants, which we need to protect. And just 7% of our native woodlands are in good ecological condition. Jackson says we need the ancient woods of the future, but we currently lack the diversity of ages and types of tree. Neil Woodrow, NTD News, Epsom, Surrey.
The Prime Minister rejects Labour's call for a full parliamentary inquiry into the Greensill lobbying row. Johnson says he shares the widespread concern over the issue.
The government announced on Monday that it had commissioned an independent review into the Greensill lobbying scandal. It will be led by corporate lawyer Nigel Boardman. On Wednesday, Labour leader Keir Starmer called instead for a full parliamentary inquiry.
Speaker, the Prime Minister should be voting with us, not blocking a proper inquiry. The Greensill scandal is just the tip of the iceberg. Dodgy contracts, privileged access, jobs for their mates. This is the return of Tory sleaze.
But the Prime Minister rejected Labour's proposal.
His own proposal is simply to have politicians marking their own homework. What the country wants, that's all it is. A committee of MPs to look at it. It won't do a blind bit of good. That's why we're having a proper independent review.
Johnson says he shares the widespread concern over the issue. Former Prime Minister David Cameron personally contacted ministers on behalf of financial services company Greensill via text and email. Cameron said he didn't break any rules. And the government stresses that Cameron's lobbying did not result in his desired aim. Johnson says he expects the results of the review by June.
Still to come, Chloe Zhao's Nomadland scoops 4 awards at the BAFTAs. That and more when we return.